What's up, YouTube? Murphy Firearms Training here. So I did a video a while back on actually my flintlock 50 cal. It is a CVA rifle, has a set trigger, on how the set trigger worked. Well, someone emailed me and asked me how to adjust a set trigger. So I'm going to walk you through it in this video, how to adjust this set trigger for what you want to do. Now, I've got my muzzleloader cocked at this point. This is actually a CVA percussion with a set trigger. I'm going to play with that. What you're going to need is a very small screwdriver. Okay, very small flathead screwdriver. You're going to need some rubber tubing. This is vacuum tubing from the auto parts store. And you're going to need a knife. This is a knife that I made in my shop out of an old deer antler that we didn't have any other use for, and a lawnmower blade. Pretty sharp, actually. So I'm going to take this tubing and I'm going to cut a piece probably that long. I mean, you know, literally 1/4 of an inch, 1/3 of an inch, 1/2 an inch, somewhere in that neighborhood. Okay. So cut a little piece of tubing, a little bitty piece of tubing here. Okay. Just like that. And what I'm going to do is actually fit that tubing over the number 11 nipple on this gun. And the reason I'm going to do that is because to test and adjust this trigger, you got to dry fire the gun. And if you dry fire on the nipple without that cushion, the nipple actually mushrooms out at the top, and then you can't get a cap on it without either replacing the nipple or taking the nipple off and filing it and all of that. So we've got our Hawken rifle, 50 cal. We've got our nipple covered here. And what we're going to do, go ahead and just lower that, make sure that that's going to hit that rubber and cushion that blow. Now, on the bottom of this gun, it's very hard to see with the trigger guard. So what I'm going to do is actually remove the trigger guard. And I'm going to be lazy. I think I can do it with this little bitty screwdriver here. And I can. And it's not great to take your trigger guard on and off, on and off, on and off, because these wood screws will get stripped. Come on. Oh, that one's too tight. Let me get the big screwdriver. Here we go. So we're going to take these two screws, front and rear, off of, and I know I'm off camera. You can't see the rear screw, but it's okay. We're going to take the front and rear screw. So I'll just scoot this over and show you. Front and rear screw off of the trigger guard. So there's our front screw. Set that down. Here's our rear screw. Okay. Take that out and sit that down. Wiggle your trigger guard out. Okay. Voila. Okay. So, and I'm doing this so that you can see these two screws better. You've got a screw in the front that's behind the front trigger. You got a screw in the back that's behind the back trigger. Okay. And I'm going to play with those. So to play with those, you need to actually cock the gun. You set the gun to full cock. You pull the set trigger. So we'll pull the set trigger and it should click, click, and then you pull the front trigger. Okay. I want to walk you through what these two screws do. So let's start with this screw here. The screw behind the straighter of the two triggers, that determines the trigger pull on the front trigger when it's set. Okay, that determines the trigger pull on the front trigger when it's set. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to loosen it and show you the effect. I want you to watch this trigger move as I turn this screw. The trigger actually moves. So I'm going to loosen that screw way up. Okay. So I'm going to pull it, well, cock the gun, pull the set trigger, okay? Now, this, with the screw very loose, puts a lot of play in that trigger. It puts a lot of play in that trigger, what's called creep, okay? You want to tighten this screw until there's no creep. What that means is that when this trigger moves, the hammer goes off. You don't want that movement. Let me show you that movement again. So I'm going to pull this. Watch this trigger. I'm going to actually grab it from the other side so you can see it. Watch how much this trigger moves before the gun goes off. Okay. You don't want that. That's called creep. Okay. You don't want that. That's not good. Okay. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to cock the gun. We're going to tighten this screw. Now, what you want to do is you want to tighten this screw half a turn to a turn at a time. Set the trigger. See how much creep you get. Okay? Still not happy. Okay. Turn it a little bit more. Okay. Another half a turn to a whole turn. I usually tell people a half a turn at a time if you don't know what you're doing. Okay. Pull the trigger. Still some creep. Don't like it. Okay. So I'm going to tighten it some more. And what I'm shooting for is that basically when the trigger moves, the gun goes off. That's what I'm shooting for. So pun intended, shooting for. Haha. Okay, so let me see if I've got it now. Watch this trigger movement. Okay, when the trigger moves, the gun goes off. Now the question is, can you get it too tight? And the answer is yes. If you tighten this screw too much, it actually can go off before you pull the trigger. Okay, so you want that right there. Let me show you again. Okay, this is perfect. I've got this set so that when this trigger moves at all, oh, a little bit of creep. I saw it. Okay, so I'm going to tighten it just a little bit more. But your goal is that when that front trigger moves at all, the gun goes off. But you don't want to get it so touchy that this thing goes off. Because sometimes you can actually, if you get this too tight, this will set and then it'll go off before you touch the trigger. So let's see. Perfect. That's what we want. I'll show you one more time. Okay. You're going to pull this. I mean, as soon as the trigger moves, the gun goes off. Cool. So that's the front screw. That's the one most people like to mess with. Now, the rear screw actually adjusts the back trigger. Let me show you that. So I'm going to loosen it. Okay. Let's see if I can loosen it. By the way, this thing's under a huge amount of spring tension. This rear screw is under a huge amount of spring tension. So if you go to this little bitty screwdriver, if you go to adjust it, so I'm going to take the screwdriver and adjust it, and it won't turn. It's really hard to turn. I'm afraid I'm going to break the tip of my screwdriver. What you're actually going to do is push back on this trigger slightly, okay, just slightly. And if you push back on this trigger slightly, it takes the tension off of this screw and makes it really easy to turn. Now, what's happening is you've got a spring in here, and that screw is putting tension on a flat bar spring. And so as you loosen this, you get less tension. Okay, so let me cock the gun. Okay. So I've got it pretty loose right now. Now what's happening when this is loose? Okay, so I've got this pretty loose. When you loosen this, it's actually very loose right now. When you loosen this, you don't put as much tension on here. Okay, and what happens is when you loosen this, okay, when you loosen this, by the way, you can set this before you cock the gun. I don't know if folks know that or not. You can set it before you cock the gun. But if I set this, okay, it has to have enough spring tension to set the hammer off, okay? Has to have enough spring tension to set the hammer off. If you loosen this screw too much, or God forbid you loosen it till it falls out, okay? And it's quite tough to loosen and tighten when it's not set. See if you can see that trigger move. I'm trying to see, because when you tighten and loosen this screw, that rear trigger tends to move. Okay, it's hard to see. It's a very small motion. There it goes. It moved forward a little bit. Can't move back a little bit. But you're going to play with that tension. You want enough tension that it's going to set off the hammer, but you don't want so much tension that it's difficult to set. And typically you can put it pretty loose and this gun still reliably go off. Okay, so pretty easy to set, pretty nice. And you can set it, cock it, and then fire it. So that's how a set trigger works. And then what I want you to notice is I can't do it without setting the trigger. Okay, what that means is I've gotten this out of adjustment too much. So everybody notice that? So what I'm going to do is actually tighten this back up. Okay, tighten this back up. Let's see if that fixes the problem. Voila. Okay, so if you get this too loose, oh, it makes the back trigger so easy to set. Now you have to use it because you've messed it up. You've messed up the geometry in here that it will not lock without the set trigger set. Okay, so that's front trigger only. Okay, front trigger only or set trigger. I loosen this too much, it won't cock. Let me show you that again. So let me loosen this back up. So if you loosen this too much, now if this is a target rifle, I'm only going to use it at the range. Set the trigger, cock it, fire it. No big deal. If it's a hunting rifle, you really want to be able to use that front trigger without the rear trigger in a case of I need to hurry up and shoot. So you got to play with this tension. Okay, you want it tight enough. You want it tight enough that it's going to go off reliably, loose enough that the trigger doesn't weigh 40 pounds, and tight enough that the front trigger will work independently. So, and again, if you go to tighten this, you're putting pressure on a spring. If you go to tighten this and it's difficult to turn, put a little pressure on the rear trigger rearward. There you go. Half cock and full cock work. Click, click, okay, without the set trigger and with the set trigger, okay? Boom, boom, boom. So anyway, that's how you adjust the set triggers on a double trigger muzzle loader. Pretty much all of them are made this way. It's a pretty much universal design. And then when you're done, you take your little piece of rubber off of your nipple and then make sure you set your hammer down gently. And you can actually reuse that. Or a lot of my muzzle loaders, I actually have it on there and I leave it on there. Okay, a lot of my muzzle loaders, I just leave it on there. It's a little piece of tubing and I just leave it on there. And then if someone wants to play with it, if someone wants to dry fire it, it's no big deal. It's just on there, whatever. You know, put your trigger guard back, you're good to go. If you get one and it's working fine, there's really no need to ever adjust them. They shouldn't come out of adjustment. But that's how you adjust those two screws and what they do. I hope that answers some questions. I hope that helps somebody. These guns are really cool. They're a lot of fun to shoot. I've got videos on how to clean them and all of that. So if you appreciate this video, if it helps you out, please give it a like. Please subscribe. If you have ideas for videos, please email me. I really do appreciate them. Thanks for the support, guys. Have a great day.